Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Well, it has been a year to remember in Canadian politics. Turbulent, to say the least. Surprising, even shocking at times, even for those of us who follow it every day. The big political story in 2024, of course, has been the waning popularity of the Trudeau government, election speculation, and the surge of support for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada. Here at the end of 2024, Pierre Poilievre has led his party to a record high in the polls, currently enjoying a 20-point lead over the incumbent Liberals nationally. Meanwhile, Team Trudeau has seen their support across the country drop to below 20%. And Justin Trudeau's personal approval rating? Well, it's never been lower. I'm David Smith. Today, on The Big Story, we have a special show for you, a year-end one-on-one conversation with the Canadian Press Newsmaker of the Year. He's the man to watch on Parliament Hill. Pierre Poilievre sat down with my colleague, Rob Snow, host of the syndicated national talk show Now You Know with Rob Snow on Rogers NewsRadio. Here is that year-end conversation in full and unedited.
It's been an incredible week in Canadian politics, and it's been another big year for our next guest. The leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, Pierre Poilievre, was named Canada's Newsmaker of the Year by the Canadian Press for the second year in a row. And he is the head of a party that holds a commanding lead in the public opinion polls as questions swirl about the future of Prime Minister Trudeau. Pierre Poilievre is with us now. Thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, Rob. Great to be with you.
We are speaking about 45 minutes before the Prime Minister's latest cabinet shuffle, which could cap a historic week in Canadian politics with the resignation of the Minister of Finance, Chrystia Freeland. In your opinion, what are the ramifications of all of this political uncertainty in Ottawa?
It's a chaotic clown show that is costing Canadians dearly. And it's showing weakness to the world. Our dollar has tanked since the Monday when the finance minister resigned mere hours before she would present a deficit that was a massive 55% over budget, an eye-watering $62 billion deficit. His own deputy prime minister had lost confidence in him. And then you have all these opportunistic liberals who now, not because they are feeling guilty about doubling housing costs or doubling the number of people who need food banks or releasing criminals into our street to cause chaos or breaking our immigration system, but because they're worried about losing their seats. Now they've turned on Justin Trudeau. And they're very blunt about it, that they don't care about the damage he's done. They care about the fact that he's not popular anymore. All these liberals, whether it's carbon tax Carney or Chrystia Freeland or these otherwise no-name backbench liberal MPs, they all helped Trudeau. They all enabled him to do the damage that he has done to our country. The only solution is to have a carbon tax election now so that we can elect a prime minister who's solid and strong, has the brains and backbone to put Canada first.
Okay, let's kind of look at this from 10,000 feet up. It has been said that any prime minister has two jobs. One is to keep the country united, and the other is to maintain friendly relations with the United States. And I would like to ask you about the second job first. If you were prime minister, what would you do to make sure the Canada-U.S. relationship remains mutually beneficial given the tariff threat from the incoming Trump administration?
First, I would put our country first. I would state to President Trump and to the whole world, Canada will never be the 51st state of the U.S. We have a heroic past, a great people, and a brilliant future as an independent country. We happen to live next to the biggest economic and military superpower the world has ever seen. but the president has concerns about our border and our military. So I would say, look, we do need to rebuild our military after the NDP Liberal government destroyed it. We need drones and helicopters, boots on the ground, scanners at our ports to stop the rampant flow of deadly drugs, guns, stolen cars, and human trafficking. We also need to rebuild our military by diverting funds away from foreign aid, back office bureaucracy, and procurement boondoggles and putting that into frontline equipment and recruitment of our brilliant men and women who will have a warrior culture, not a woke culture. And I think that will give a lot of ease to the incoming president about our reliability in keeping his northern flank safe. I'll also say to the president, though, yes, it's true, we have a trade surplus with America, but that's not at his expense, it's at ours. It's not because we're ripping him off, it's because we're ripping ourselves off. We have blocked, under Trudeau and the NDP, they blocked pipelines, LNG plants, and refineries. So we have to send our raw materials to the Americans at a massive discount, and they make all the profit and the wages off of those. So we've been donating this money to the Americans. And my plan is to reverse that by unleashing production here in Canada. Let's repeal the anti-energy laws, axe the carbon tax, and remove the red tape so that we can upgrade our own resources in Canada rather than being permanently dependent on the Americans.
On the other big job, keeping the country united. Western Canada is very angry with the government in Ottawa. There are disagreements on too many issues to list right now. In Quebec, it appears the Separatist Parti Québécois could win the next provincial election in Quebec, and it's promising another sovereignty referendum. If you were the prime minister, what would you do to heal these divisions and keep the country together?
And not to mention the other more terrifying divisions, like these anti-Semitic riots that have exploded onto our streets, the foreign conflicts that have now spilled into Canadian neighborhoods that have been going on for centuries around the world, whether it's the Middle East or India or elsewhere, and never affected Canada within its borders. Now, after 9 years of Trudeau dividing our people, losing control of immigration and borders, we have people terrorized by these radical uprisings. So it all has to stop. So one, we have to get control of our borders. We have to expel anyone who breaks laws or participates in hate festivals against synagogues. We have to stop attacking our regions of our country. Like, let's get Ottawa out of the lives of Quebecers and Albertans. Let's have a smaller government that respects its own jurisdiction, and let's Albertans do what they want with their economy. Let's Quebecers have their more autonomy over their culture. That's how Harper did it. And guess what? The separatists were dead in Quebec, and they were unheard of in Alberta. And by the way, we had about 75% less hate crime across the country. So we know the formula. It's to have a small government that does its job well and leaves people alone, and then they live their lives peacefully and harmoniously.
I'm here with the Conservative Party leader, Pierre Poilievre. There have been 3 Conservative governments in my lifetime. I'm in my early 50s. There was the brief minority government of Prime Minister Joe Clark. There was the transformative government of Brian Mulroney. And then there was the government that you were part of, Stephen Harper's government. What lessons have you learned from these previous Conservative prime ministers? And how would a government led by you be different or the same?
Well, I think we need to get back to the common sense consensus that predominated from 1984 with the election of Brian Mulroney until 2015 with the departure of Stephen Harper. And I include, frankly, the Liberal governments of Chrétien and Martin in that common sense consensus. And the Liberals believed in liberty, Conservatives believed in conserving it. We all believed in balanced budgets and free markets, free trade, small government, less bureaucracy. We all agreed that if someone did a bunch of crimes, they should stay in jail so they didn't terrorize our communities. We all agreed with immigration to bring people here who could integrate and get a job and a home, but we kept the levels and the screening to protect our national interests. That was the common sense consensus that made this the enemy of the world. And so my message to both Liberals and Conservatives who enjoyed that incredible golden era for our country is, let's build the future on that same common sense consensus.
I take a lot of calls from listeners, Mr. Poilievre, from all across the country, from Western Canada, Atlantic Canada, Southern Ontario. This year, I've taken a lot of calls from people who support you. I have taken calls from people who don't support you and say they won't vote for you. And one of the concerns I often hear from people who don't support you is the issue of foreign interference in your refusal to get the security clearance and read that unredacted intelligence report. Some of your doubters have gone so far as to suggest there must be something in your background that makes it impossible for you to get that security clearance. What would you tell people who have these doubts?
Well, it's false. I was already a cabinet minister, and I will add that the government has the ability to tell me any time if there is anyone interfering in the Conservative Party without swearing me to secrecy. It would be stupid for me to take an oath of secrecy on one of the biggest public policy issues and also have the inability to act on whatever intelligence they gave me. So if I do a secrecy oath and the thesis comes and says, well, you got this problematic person, theoretically, I would be banned from actually telling my party or my caucus. My caucus would have to vote on expelling that person without knowing anything about the details because I would be banned from saying anything to them. So what I've said to them is use the powers you have under the CSIS Act already to tell me if there's anyone in our caucus or in our party that has knowingly worked with a foreign government. And I have seen no evidence whatsoever that that is the case. So that's why I've taken the approach I have. And it's why, by the way, let's be honest, Justin Trudeau is the one that has turned Canada into a playground for foreign interference. We didn't hear these problems before he came along and knowingly allowed Beijing to interfere in 2 consecutive elections, knowingly had caucus members who he had been compromised. He had been briefed on their past activities and collaborations with Beijing. And so they're using this as a distraction from their own guilt in this affair.
Okay.
And by the way, the one last thing I will say, Rob, is I am the only leader that's saying release the names. If there are MPs that have knowingly worked for a foreign government, put it out, publish it. I'm not afraid because I'm confident that we've done everything right. But put the names out publicly and let Canadians decide for themselves.
The House of Commons is supposed to return on the 27th of January, whether that will happen or not, or whether the House will be prorogued or not. Who knows what the next days or weeks might bring. When do you think the next election will be?
2 words, Jagmeet Singh. Jagmeet Singh is the only one who can decide. He's the one keeping Trudeau in power right now. He voted against a non-confidence motion little more than 10 days ago. We would be a third of the way through the election campaign right now had he voted otherwise. But, of course, his pension doesn't kick in until February. And so we're now held hostage. 41 million Canadians are held hostage by one man's desire to have a pension. And I think that is totally unacceptable. He needs to put the country before his pension and vote for an axe-to-tax election now.
All right, I asked you this last year. You didn't have an answer at that time. I'm going to ask you again this year. What is your New Year's resolution?
I would say it's to fix what Trudeau broke and bring home the country that we knew and still love. And the reason why I can answer that this year is because the election is going to be next year. And so I need to win. So I can, for example, axe the carbon tax and take GST off new homes. So kids in places like Riverside South and Barrhaven, Canada can afford a home again. Get the spending under control. Bring in tougher laws for criminals. All of that. That's how we're going to fix the country, and that's my New Year's resolution.
Okay. All the best to you and your family. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Pierre Poilievre. Thanks for the time.
Thank you very much, Rob, and Merry Christmas to your family. Bye now.
Again, that is Pierre Poilievre speaking with my colleague Rob Snow, host of Now You Know with Rob Snow on the Rogers News Radio Network. You can hear Rob's show 12 to 3 p.m. Eastern on the radio or on the Seeker app. That was The Big Story. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or on all your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. I'm David Smith. Thank you for listening.